Voice of Cards The Isle Dragon Roars is a turn-based JRPG card battler. While it does sound unique, it isn't something completely new. But what if a game took the card aspect and made it a central selling point? How would you go about doing that? Well, you make everything cards. Title screen? Cards. Dungeon? Cards. Towns? Cards. Battles? Cards. Dialogue and character art? You get it. Square Enix is the developer and publisher of this strange game, and at the head of the creative team is, well, now everything makes sense.
As the trio approaches the treasure chest, an awful rumbling resounds deep in the cave.
At the beginning of the game, you take control of some very hero-esque characters on a quest to retrieve a royal treasure. It serves as the tutorial and the sudden realization that everything is cards. More about that in the gameplay section next. The heroes you control are strong and confident, defeating the enemies with ease. We are then taken to a royal throne room of Castle Advent, where we meet the actual protagonist of the game, a greedy, selfish warrior that you get to name. From there, you sign your name to slay the dragon disturbing the land, and head off. As you progress through the named towns in the world, you'll meet unique characters, gain new allies, and further cement your hatred towards the Ivory Order, the heroes that you controlled in the tutorial. To be fair, the Ivory Order trio are a bunch of assholes too. The Drakengard team always love to have protagonists who are unlikable dicks. Throughout this linear progression, you will eventually come face to face with the titular dragon. But what ending will you get? Were you a jerk to the NPCs you came across? Then you might get one of the bad endings. The gameplay is definitely the highlight of the game, as the whole thing is card-based. You can't help but appreciate the thought put into the game, from handling how to portray dialogue and items, having battles fun and exciting, but keeping it all within the realm of cards and giving it a tactile board game feel. The development team wanted Voice of Cards to have a feel of a physical game. It was difficult to find that balance. Ultimately, with cards being the main theme, we incorporated as much as we could in terms of presentation, from haphazard placement of cards and pieces to the sensation of turning over cards, as well as depictions of enemies like foil stamping, burning, and freezing. That said, there are a few things lacking from an all-card experience. Character interactions are quite boring, what with having only one portrait to show all emotions, as well as a lack of voices for the characters. Instead, voice acting is substituted with a narrator that takes on every bit of text, kind of like a dungeon master in Dungeons & Dragons. But he makes no effort to change his voice for dialogue.
When you tell her you're after the same thing, she squints down her nose at you. "Fine," she says. "I can help you."
How does the battle hold up? Surprisingly well. You have 4 different skill cards you can assign to your characters, some being simple attacks while others require crystals to charge it up and unleash death. You accumulate these crystals with each character's turn, or by magically charging. Some skills do more damage, some can hit all enemies, or they can have a chance to freeze an enemy by rolling a die above a certain number. Of course, enemies have their own unique skills and abilities and can hit back just as hard as you in battle. You don't have a wealth of HP at your disposal, so one good hit can cut a character's health in half. As you continue with the story, enemies will become harder with specific weaknesses, threatening your band of adventurers with a game over if you get too comfortable with the battle, which unfortunately does happen at times. You will come across the same enemies in the area you're exploring, repeating the same motions of casting fire spells on mushrooms that will insta-kill them, and render battles a bit monotonous. One gripe I do have with the game is the random events that can happen while you're exploring the world map or even a dungeon. In a certain forest, you can hear music in the distance, and you're given the choice to follow it or ignore it. This happens so many times with the same dialogue text and the same outcome each time. Sometimes they're extremely beneficial, such as a rare monster that dishes out loads of experience points, but most of the time they suck. listen to the music of Voice of Cards, you know it's Keiichi Okabe. The Nier music bleeds through, no, more like it soaks the soundtrack. Though there are a few tracks that are lighter, standing away from the development team's previous titles that were steeped in dark, depressing tones. However, the soundtrack is limited. Don't expect unique songs for each town. They will be all the same. World map? Well, it's just one big song, my friend, and the battles you encounter on the map will be using the same tune. Boss battles are granted a special battle song, thankfully, but it's the same one each time, yet again. I suppose I shouldn't be too harsh with the game, as it's rather short, but I do like my music in games, and this one kind of just delivered too little for my liking. The narrator's voice is fine in English, better in Japanese, though I ended up staying with the English one so that I could pace the card dialogue better.
The woman slides the simple key into the lock. The chest clicks open.
君は旅の途中で探してみようと思い、紙切れをカバンの中にしまった。
I would have liked a deeper voice, though. And of course, as mentioned before, some voice acting for the more prominent characters in the game would have added just the right amount of variety to prevent it from being too stale. Sound effects are great in the game, as they add to the team's goal of making it feel like a physical tabletop game. The spells crashing into the enemies, the dice being rolled, the enemy's HP gem breaking, the drop of the crystal in the compartment in battle. Even the whoosh of cards flipping over just sounds nice. In the end, if you want to experience a very abstract way to play through a game, Voice of Cards: The Isle Dragon Roars is a short yet interesting playthrough. If you're a fan of Yoko Taro's work, definitely have a go at it, but perhaps only when it's on sale, as once you get the good ending, there's no real point in replaying the game. I'll leave you with this great quote from Yoko Taro himself, where he answers the question, why did you make the decision to build the entire world from cards? Games have evolved as if imitating reality, but when displaying a 3D space on TV in a 2D format, or when converting various human movements into gamepad controls, it requires summarizing, or making abstract to a certain extent. Additionally, the format in which recent video games are being summarized is being more and more entrenched. Given this sort of situation, we thought, if we're going to make a game more abstract anyway, why not consolidate it into a more compact presentation, which would then allow for people to perceive and explore entertainment in their own way. This led to our decision to take on this challenge. But that's just the lie, and the actual reason is because no other previous game had been portrayed with only cards.